versus marketing, marketing versus sales, missed schedule issues, sales missing the plan, running out of money, raising new money. I began to gain an appreciation of how world-class venture capitalists develop pattern recognition for these common types of problems. Oh yes, Company X, they're having problem 343. Here are the 6 likely ways that it will resolve, with these probabilities. No one was actually quite that good, but some VCs had golden guts for these kinds of operating issues. Yet something in the back of my mind bothered me. If great venture capitalists could recognize and sometimes predict the types of problems that were occurring, didn't that mean the problems were structural rather than endemic? Wasn't something fundamentally wrong with the way everyone organizes and manages startups? Wasn't it possible the problems in every startup were somehow self-inflicted and could be ameliorated with a different structure? Yet when I talked to my venture capital friends, they said, "Well, that's just how startups work. We've managed startups like this forever. There is no other way to manage them." After my 8th and likely final startup, Epiphany, it became clear there's a better way to manage startups. Joseph Campbell's insight of the repeatable patterns in mythology is equally applicable to building a successful startup. All startups, whether a new division inside a larger corporation or in the canonical garage, follow similar patterns, a series of steps which, when followed, can eliminate a lot of the early wandering in the dark. Startups that have thrived reflect this pattern again and again and again. So what is it that makes some startups successful and leaves others selling off their furniture? Simply this. Startups that survive the first few tough years do not follow the traditional product-centric launch model espoused by product managers or the venture capital community. Through trial and error, hiring and firing, successful startups all invent a parallel process to product development. In particular, the winners invent and live by a process of customer learning and discovery. I call this process customer development, a sibling to product development, and each and every startup that succeeds recapitulates it, knowingly or not. This book describes the customer development model in detail. The model is a paradox because it is followed by successful startups, yet articulated by no one. Its basic propositions are the antithesis of common wisdom, yet they are followed by those who succeed. It is the path that is hidden in plain sight. Introduction. Think different. Steve Jobs. When I wrote The 4 Steps to the Epiphany over a decade ago, I had no idea I would be starting the lean startup revolution. Newly retired, with time to reflect on what I had learned from my 21 years as an entrepreneur, I was struggling to reconcile the reality of my experience with the then common advice about how to start a company. Investors, VCs, and educators all taught entrepreneurs to use the same process used in an established company. To be successful, you wrote a plan, raised money, and then executed to the plan, all in a very linear direction. My experience suggested that they were all wrong. I spent several years working through a different approach to building startups. This became the customer development process and the idea of market types. In hindsight, I now realize that while educators and startup investors had adapted tools and processes useful for executing a business model, there were no tools and processes to search for a business model. It seemed obvious to me that searching is what startups actually do, but it was a pretty lonely couple of years convincing others. Over time, necessity, not investors or educators, drove the adoption of the customer development process. The emerging web, mobile, and cloud apps, built with small teams already using agile development, needed a much faster process to acquire customer feedback. This new generation of entrepreneurs were rapid early adopters of customer development as it helped them reduce the odds of failing by getting them out of the building to get early customer feedback as they built their product incrementally and iteratively. About a decade ago, after The 4 Steps was published, I began teaching the customer development process as a full-semester course at UC Berkeley. A student in my first Berkeley class, Eric Rees, became the first practitioner and tireless evangelist of the process at IMVU, iterating and testing the process as I sat on his board. His insight coupled customer development to the emerging agile engineering practice, and together the two methodologies helped founders to rapidly iterate their